and welcome to Springfield Career Insights. Tonight, we interrogate the silent corrosion of workplaces. Is an office merely a site of labor, or can it become a theater of oppression? We explore how toxic work environments erode dignity, suppress innovation, and fracture institutional clarity, leaving professionals broken beneath the weight of blind authority. In this episode, we ask, what must Springfield do to restore sovereignty to the workplace? Should survival mean silence, or must professionals reclaim their dignity as the foundation of institutional excellency? We are joined by His Excellency Dr. Godfrey Gandawa, President of Springfield Research University, legal advisor, and architect of Education 6.0. His work reframes the office not as a site of endurance, but as a sovereign arena of dignity and innovation. Welcome, President. We are honored to host you.
Thank you, Advocate. At Springfield, we believe that workplaces must be sovereign, anchored in dignity, liberated from toxicity, and accountable to innovation and institutional clarity.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, how do you define a toxic work environment, not only emotionally, but institutionally?
Thank you, Advocate. So, a toxic work environment is not simply about bad moods or difficult colleagues. It is a system that corrodes dignity. Emotionally, it is the space where fear replaces trust, where gossip replaces collaboration, and where exhaustion replaces creativity. But institutionally, toxicity is deeper. It is when the very structure of the workplace normalizes harm. It appears in policies that exploit rather than protect, where productivity is demanded without regard for human limits. It appears in cultures that silence, where speaking truth about abuse or injustice is punished instead of dignified. It appears in leadership that manipulates, where authority is used to guide but not to control, eroding autonomy and initiative. And it appears in systems that reward distraction, where sabotage, favoritism, and unethical conduct are tolerated because they serve short-term gains. So a toxic office is not just a place where people feel bad. It is an institution that breaks its people. It is the office that drains emotional energy, distorts professional identity, and corrodes civic responsibility. So the sovereign definition is this: a toxic work environment is any workplace where the structures of power and culture combine to make harm normal, silence mandatory, and dignity optional.
Thank you, Professor. What are the signs that a workplace is eroding professional dignity and becoming toxic?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, the signs unfold in sequence, and each one speaks loudly when dignity is being drained. So first, silence replaces voice. So employees begin to fear speaking truth, knowing that honesty will be punished rather than respected. Second, suspicion replaces trust. Colleagues are treated as competitors, and gossip becomes the current that corrodes collaboration. Third, gossip replaces professionalism. Conversations drift into rumor, character assassination, and destructive storytelling. Instead of building solutions, the office becomes a marketplace of whispers. And fourth, exploitation replaces fairness. Workloads are piled without regard for human limits, and sacrifices demanded without recognition. Fifth, Manipulation replaces leadership. Authority is used not to guide but to control, stripping workers of autonomy and initiative. Sixth, erosion replaces growth. Creativity is stifled, ambition is mocked, and professionals begin to lose their sense of identity. And seventh, disorder of levels take root. Toxic institutions blur boundaries. Everyone feels entitled to discuss matters above their level, not to elevate themselves, but to destabilize order. Gossip about leadership decisions, confidential issues, or strategic matters becomes common, eroding respect for hierarchy and clarity of roles. So the sovereign truth is this: a workplace becomes toxic the moment it normalizes whispers over wisdom, suspicion over trust, and captivity over dignity.
Thank you, Professor. How do you distinguish between difficult leadership and systemic toxicity?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, the distinction is critical. Difficult leadership is about personality. It may be demanding, exacting, even harsh at times, but it remains bounded by fairness, by respect of rules, and by recognition of human dignity. A difficult leader may stretch you, but they do not break you. They challenge. Their challenge is aimed at growth, not destruction. Systemic toxicity is, however, not about one leader's temperament. It is about an institution that normalizes harm. Here, cruelty is not occasional. It is structural. So, policies exploit rather than protect. Gossip is tolerated as culture, and silence is enforced as survival. In systemic toxicity, the problem is not one person's style. You see, it is the entire system's design. So the difference lies in intent and structure. Difficult leadership tests capacity. Systemic toxicity erodes identity. Difficult leadership may feel heavy, but it still respects boundaries. Toxic systems erase boundaries altogether, leaving workers captive to suspicion, exploitation, and disorder. The sovereign measure is this: if leadership stretches you towards growth, it is difficult. If the institution breaks you into silence, suspicion, and captivity, it is toxic.
Thank you, Professor. Let's take a break and listen to a song called Breathe Again.
I've walked through fire, I've felt the strain, the weight of silence, the ache of pain. But in the stillness I hear your name, calling me to rise again. Breathe again.
Just love untold, you restore what
Welcome back. Let's continue with our discussion. What are the long-term effects of workplace toxicity on innovation, retention, and morale?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, the effects are devastating and they unfold over time like a slow erosion of the institution itself. You see? So, first, innovation collapses. Creativity cannot thrive in captivity. When workers are silenced, mistrusted, or manipulated, they stop experimenting, they stop risking, they stop imagining. So the office becomes a place of repetition, not invention. Second, retention declines. So talented professionals do not remain where dignity is denied. They leave quietly, taking their skills and their loyalty with them. And what remains is not excellence, but exhaustion. So an institution staffed by those who too wary or too trapped to escape. Third, morale disintegrates. Suspicion, gossip, and exploitation drain the spirit of the workplace. So workers lose pride in their craft, joy in their collaboration, and hope in their future. You see, the office becomes not a community, but a cage. So the long-term effects are clear. Toxicity does not simply hurt individuals. It dismantles institutions. It kills innovation. It drives away talent, and it erodes morale until the workplace itself becomes unsustainable. So the sovereign truth is this: no nation, no company, no institution can prosper when its offices break its people.
Thank you, Professor. What myths keep professionals trapped in toxic institutions, especially in academia and public service?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, the myths are powerful and they chain many professionals to institutions that break them. First, the myth of loyalty. Workers are told that living is betrayal, that endurance is virtue, but loyalty to toxicity is not dignity, is it? It is captivity. Second, the myth of prestige. So in academia and public service, titles and positions are treated as what? As shields. Professionals stay because the institution is respected, even when the respect is hollow and the culture corrosive. So prestige without dignity is a mask, not a crown. Third, the myth of indispensability. Survivors are convinced that the system cannot function without them, that their sacrifice is noble. In truth, toxic institutions exploit this belief, draining talent while offering no restoration. Fourth, the myth of reform from within. So many believe they can change the system by enduring it. But when toxicity is structural, endurance alone does not reform. It normalizes harm. Reform requires courage, collective voice, and institutional accountability. So the sovereign truth is this: professionals remain trapped not because they lack options, but because myths convince them captivity is noble. Breaking free begins with breaking the myths, choosing dignity over loyalty, substance over prestige, restoration over sacrifice.
Thank you, Professor. What is your counsel to professionals who feel silenced or sabotaged in toxic environments?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, my counsel begins with recognition. First, name the silence and sabotage for what they are, not personal weaknesses, but institutional harm. When you recognize the pattern, you reclaim clarity. Second, protect your dignity with boundaries. Do not allow gossip, manipulation, or exploitation to define your worth. Boundaries are not rebellion, they are survival. Third, seek allies and mentors. Isolation is the weapon of toxic systems, but solidarity is the antidote. Find those who model integrity, who remind you that your voice matters, and who can guide you through the fog of sabotage. Number 4 is fourth, document and escalate wisely. Silence thrives when harm is hidden. By recording patterns and raising them through proper channels, you transform private injury into institutional accountability. And fifth, and finally, remember that captivity is not destined. If the institution refuses reform, choose liberty. Leaving toxicity is not betrayal. It is preservation. Your talent, your creativity, your dignity deserve spaces that nourish, not destroy. You can move on. So my counsel is this: recognize, protect, seek, escalate. If necessary, depart. Because no professional should remain silenced in an office that breaks them.
Thank you, Professor. How should institutions respond when staff raise concerns about workplace harm?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, the response must be immediate, structured, and dignified. First, institutions must listen without punishment. When staff raise concerns, the act of speaking is itself courageous. To silence or retaliate is to deepen the harm. So, listening must be safe, confidential, and respectful. Second, institutions must investigate with integrity. Concerns cannot be brushed aside or diluted into misunderstandings. So, a credible process, transparent, impartial, and thorough, signals that the institution values truth over convenience. Third, institutions must act decisively. Harm identified must be corrected, whether through policy reform, leadership accountability, or cultural recalibration. So, to acknowledge without action is to betray trust. Fourth, institutions must restore dignity. Survivors of workplace harm need more than resolution. They need assurance that their voice mattered, that their courage reshaped the institution, and that their future will not be defined by past injury. And finally, institutions must embed prevention. Responding to harm is not enough. Systems must be built to ensure harm does not recur. Training, mentorship, civic responsibility must become part of the workplace DNA. So the sovereign counsel is this: when staff raise concerns, institutions must not defend themselves. They must transform themselves, because the measure of leadership is not how harm is denied, but how dignity is restored.
Thank you, Professor. Let's take a break and listen to a song called Anchor of My Soul.
Storms may rise and shadows fall, but you remain my refuge, my all. Though the waves roar and doubts unfold, you are the anchor of my soul, anchor of my soul. Voices fade and strength is gone. Your word sustains, your light lives on. You hold me fast, you make
Welcome back. Let's continue with our discussion. What does a dignified grievance protocol look like from documentation to resolution?
And thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, a dignified grievance protocol is not a formality. It is a covenant between the institution and its people. So it begins with open doors. Staff must know that raising a concern will not invite punishment, but protection. So the act of speaking must be treated as courage, not rebellion. So it continues with clear documentation. So grievances must be recorded faithfully, not distorted or buried. So every detail matters because dignity is preserved when truth is captured without manipulation. Then comes credible investigation. So impartial, transparent, and timely. So a grievance protocol loses its soul when investigations are cosmetic. Integrity must be the spine of the process, ensuring that staff believe the institution values justice over convenience. Resolution must be restorative, not cosmetic. Correcting harm is more than issuing a memo. You see? It is about repairing trust, holding accountable those who caused injury, and ensuring survivors feel their voice reshaped the institution. So finally, a dignified protocol embeds prevention. It does not wait for the next grievance. It reforms culture, strengthens policies, and it trains leaders to ensure harm does not recur. So the sovereign image is this. A grievance protocol is a bridge. It carries staff from injury to restoration, from silence to voice, from captivity to dignity. And unless the bridge is strong, the institution itself will collapse under the weight of its own harm.
Thank you, Professor. What role does leadership recalibration play in transforming toxic cultures?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, leadership recalibration is the hinge on which transformation turns. Toxic cultures do not change because the staff whisper or policies are drafted. They change when leaders themselves shift posture. Recalibration means leaders must move from control to guidance. Authority must stop being a weapon and become a compass. It means shifting from silence to listening. Leaders must hear grievances not as threats, but as opportunities to restore dignity. So it means moving from prestige to accountability. Titles cannot shield misconduct. You see? They must magnify responsibility. When leaders recalibrate, they model new norms. Staff begin to trust again. Innovation reawakens and morale rises. Without recalibration, reforms remain cosmetic. Policies exist on paper, but culture remains captive. So, the sovereign truth is this: leadership recalibration is not adjustment. It is transformation. It is the act of turning power into service, hierarchy into responsibility, and institutions into communities of dignity. Without it, toxicity survives. With it, and cultures are reborn.
Thank you, Professor. What does a sovereign exit look like? Not merely resignation, but strategic recalibration.
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, a sovereign exit is not the act of walking away in defeat. It is the art of living with dignity, clarity, and strategy. So, resignation is often reactive, born of exhaustion or despair. But a sovereign exit is deliberate. It transforms departure into recalibration. So it begins with clarity of purpose, knowing that living is not escape, but alignment with values. So it continues with documentation of lessons, carrying forward the wisdom of what broke you so that you never replicate captivity elsewhere. It requires strategic timing, choosing the moment when your departure speaks loudly, not only to protect yourself, but to signal to the institution that dignity cannot be negotiated. So a sovereign exit also involves repositioning, moving into spaces that nourish creativity, protect dignity, and allow your talent to flourish. It is not about abandoning the profession, but about recalibrating your trajectory so that your career remains a vessel of liberty, not a chain of captivity. So the sovereign image is this: resignation is a door slammed in frustration. A sovereign exit is a bridge built towards restoration. One collapses behind you, the other carries you forward with dignity.
Thank you, Professor. How can professionals rebuild confidence and career momentum after leaving a toxic institution?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, rebuilding after toxicity is not simply about finding another job. It is about restoring the soul of one's profession. So, confidence and momentum return when professionals treat departure not as an ending, is it? But as a recalibration. The first step is restoration itself. So survivors must reclaim their dignity by acknowledging that the harm they endured was systemic, not a reflection of their worth. Healing spaces, mentorship, therapy, or creative outlets become the soil in which confidence grows again. Momentum is rekindled through strategic repositioning. So professionals must align with institutions that nourish creativity and respect boundaries. So this is not about rushing back into work, but about choosing environments where liberty, not captivity, defines the culture. So confidence deepens through visible contribution. Publishing, teaching, innovating, and mentoring allows survivors to demonstrate that their talent was never broken, only suppressed. So each act of contribution becomes proof that their career is not defined by the toxicity they escaped. You see? And finally, momentum is sustained by vision. Survivors must set new goals that rise above the old wounds, goals that remind them their profession is a calling, not a cage. So the sovereign counsel is this: rebuild confidence by restoring dignity, and rebuild momentum by choosing liberty. Because leaving toxicity is not the end of a career, it is the beginning of a sovereign one.
Wow, this is amazing. Let's take a commercial break and stay tuned.
At Springfield Research University, we don't teach to pass exams, we encode futures. Grounded in Education 6.0 and powered by STEMA, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, medicine, and automation, we deliver modular, sovereign learning across undergraduate, master's, and doctoral programs. Explore our prospectus, where every curriculum is designed to stematize every discipline, dignify local authorship, and credential transformative knowledge. Be stematized, be sovereign. Here, knowledge is authored, not borrowed. Curriculum is credentialed, not copied. Every graduate becomes an architect of transformation. With 2 annual intakes, March and September, the path to innovation is always open. From the logic of automation to the soul of indigenous intelligence, SRU is where tomorrow is designed. Springfield isn't just a university, it's an epicenter of epistemic dignity. Join the movement. Study where learning governs itself. Springfield Research University, the globe is here. Where are you?
Welcome back. Let's continue with our discussion. What boundaries should professionals set to prevent future institutional compromise?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, boundaries are the architecture of dignity. Without them, institutions consume professionals until compromise becomes culture. To prevent this, professionals must learn to draw lines that protect both their identity and their craft. They must establish clarity of role, never allowing gossip or disorder of levels to drag them into matters beyond their mandate. When everyone speaks of everything, hierarchy collapses and dignity erodes. They must insist on limits of workload, refusing to equate exploitation with excellence. Sacrifice without recognition is not professionalism, it is captivity. They must guard integrity of voice, speaking truth without fear, but also refusing to be silenced by intimidation. So, a professional who cannot speak is already compromised. They must protect autonomy of thought, resisting manipulation that turns creativity into conformity. Innovation thrives only when minds are free. And they must uphold respect for confidentiality, never allowing rumor or gossip to replace responsibility. So institutions collapse when private matters become public currents. So the Sovereign Council is this: boundaries are not barriers, they are shields. They protect professionals from compromise, and they protect institutions from collapse. Without boundaries, captivity spreads. With the boundaries, dignity endures.
Thank you, Professor. What policies should institutions adopt to prevent toxicity before it begins?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, prevention is the highest form of leadership. So, institutions must not wait for harm to erupt. They must design cultures where dignity is safeguarded from the start. So, policies must enshrine voice without fear, ensuring that staff can speak truth, raise concerns, and challenge injustice without retaliation. So a grievance protocol must be proactive, not reactive, signaling that silence will never be the price of employment. They must embed boundaries of workload and respect, codifying limits that protect professionals from exploitation disguised as excellence. So productivity must be measured alongside dignity so that sacrifice is never mistaken for success. Institutions must legislate confidentiality and order of levels, making gossip a violation, not a norm. When everyone feels entitled to discuss matters beyond their mandate, hierarchy collapses and toxicity takes root. So respect for roles must be protected by policy, not left to chance. They must adopt leadership accountability frameworks, where authority is tied to service, not control. Leaders must be trained, evaluated, and recalibrated to ensure their conduct builds trust rather than erodes it. And finally, institutions must weave well-being into governance, providing counseling, mentorship, and restorative programs as part of professional development. Emotional health must be treated as infrastructure, not as an afterthought. So the sovereign decree is this: prevention is policy, not hope. Institutions that codify dignity before harm begins will never collapse into captivity.
Thank you, Professor. How can leaders be trained to recognize when their culture is breeding fear instead of excellence?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, the training must begin with awareness. So, leaders must be taught to read the atmosphere of their institutions, to sense when silence is heavy, when gossip is loud, and when creativity has vanished. So, fear leaves fingerprints, meetings where no one speaks, corridors filled with whispers, innovation replaced by repetition. So, training must also cultivate emotional literacy. Leaders must learn to distinguish between discipline and intimidation, between accountability and humiliation. Excellence thrives when staff feels stretched but supported. Fear takes root when staff feels watched but unvalued. You see? Another dimension is feedback calibration. Leaders must be trained to invite critique without retaliation, to treat dissent as contribution rather than rebellion. When staff hesitate to speak, it is not respect, it is fear. Finally, training must embed diagnostic reflection. So leaders must regularly ask, are my people growing? Are they shrinking? Are they proud? Or are they silent? Excellency is measured in confidence and creativity. Fear is measured in withdrawal and suspicion. So the Sovereign Council is this. Leaders must be trained not only to manage tasks, but to read souls. Because the true test of leadership is not how many obey, but how many flourish.
Thank you, Professor. Finally, if you could issue one decree to all professionals trapped in toxic workplaces, what would it be?
Thank you, Advocate. So, Advocate, my decree will be simple yet sovereign. Never confuse captivity with loyalty. Your dignity is not a debt owed to an institution that breaks you. Your voice, your creativity, your liberty are not negotiable. If you find yourself silenced, sabotaged, or consumed by gossip and exploitation, remember this. You are not trapped, you are being tested. And the test is whether you will choose to preserve yourself or surrender to erosion. So my decree is this. Depart with dignity, recalibrate with courage, rebuild with vision. Because no professional should ever remain chained to a workplace that thrives on fear. The sovereign path is not endurance of harm, but liberation into excellence. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, President, for reframing workplaces not as sites of endurance, but as sovereign arenas of dignity and innovation. Your insistence on clarity and accountability reminds us that institutions without dignity are institutions without survival. To our audience, if you're ready to liberate your workplace from toxicity, reclaim innovation as dignity, and design institutions that empower rather than erode, Springfield Research University awaits you. Visit www.springfieldresearchuniversity.net and join the mission to structure workplaces with sovereign clarity. That brings us to the end of this diagnostic edition of Springfield Career Insights. May tonight's reflections provoke courage, reform, and institutional renewal. I am Clarence, your host. Good night.
Hey, hey, siyakubuka, tikiti lefu Tanzania kiwa. Hey, hey, siyakubuka, sonke siyavumelana, ngemjululo bushe sonke similela. Hey, hey, siyakubuka, tikiti lefu Tanzania kiwa. Hey, 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 siyakubuka, sonke siyavumelana, ngemjululo bushe sonke similela.
In the heart of Springfield, a new dawn breaks. With Channel Yamaswati, our future takes shape. Career insights, knowledge shared so bright. Together we rise, reaching new heights. Springfield's calling, let's unite. With Channel Yamaswati, we ignite. Innovation and growth, we lead the way. Together we shine, here to stay. Together we rise, together we shine. vision clear. With collaboration, there's nothing to fear. Education and research, hand in hand, building a future where dreams will stand. Springfield's calling, let's unite. Channel Yemaswati, we ignite. Innovation and growth, we lead the way. Together we shine, here to stay. Together we rise, together we shine. Springfield and Yemaswati, all proud, all time. Springfield and Yemaswati, partners for all time. Doors are opening to a world so grand. In STEM fields we proudly stand. Channel Yemaswati, our guiding light. Together we conquer, our future bright. Springfield's calling, let's unite. Spread your knowledge, unite. The channel Yemaswati, we ignite. Nothing moving, we're for elevation and growth. We lead the way. Together we shine, here to stay. Together we rise. Together we shine. Together we rise. Together we shine. Together we conquer. No challenge too steep. Challenge to spring. Research University, our guiding star. The channel Yemaswati will go far.
The Law Factor with advocate Clarence Arenas Gandawa.
Touch so wild, set me on fire. Heartbeats loud, we're taking it higher. Can't escape when we
In a world of headlines and hashtags, justice must hold its silence. Today we examine the courtroom under public glare and ask, who really delivers the verdict? This is the Law Factor. Over to you, advocate.
Thank you, Stella. Greetings to you all. Courtroom ethics, the rise of media, and the trial by public opinion. Justice must be served in court, not on timelines and comment threads. The collision of law and public platforms. Justice is now practiced in two arenas, the courtroom and the screen. As Eswatini's legal cases ignite online debates before evidence is led, due process is trained under public scrutiny, leaks, and unverified accusations. This episode interrogates the ethical fault lines exposed by the rise of media trials. Judicial Code of Conduct in media-sensitive trials. There was a time when justice entered the courtroom untainted, when its pace was slow, its process sacred, and its verdict unknown until the law had spoken. Today, that silence has been shattered. Our judges no longer preside over matters in isolation. They enter the chamber already burdened by public verdicts rendered in tweets, headlines, and hashtags. And so I say this clearly. Our magistrates now walk a tightrope suspended over the roaring crowd. Every decision, every silence, every glance is read as signal or bias. The stakes are no longer just legal, they are existential. Impartiality must now fight for survival. Legitimacy must defend itself, not in argument, but in posture. Public confidence hangs by the thread of judicial restraint. A judge must not become a mirror for popular emotion. Judicial officers must resist the urge to clarify, to respond, to reassure the crowd baying just outside the courtroom walls. You do not owe them commentary. You owe them conduct. Your dignity lies in your refusal to perform. Codes of conduct must rise to meet this age. No winks, no whispers, no digital breadcrumbs dropped to carry public favor. Judges must not litigate through implication, nor settle nerves through indirect signaling. The only language they may speak is the language of reason, delivered from the bench and nowhere else. And as for the courtroom itself, it must become fortress and sanctuary once again. Footage must not leak like water through broken pipes. Press access must be disciplined, not permissive. This is not censorship, it is stewardship. The judicial process is not a spectacle to be streamed. It is a deliberation to be protected. Because in this moment, we face a crisis of perception. If the public begins to believe that justice is shaped by tweets, then every verdict, even the fairest, becomes suspect. And when the public confidence falls, the entire architecture collapses. Now, prosecutorial discretion versus public prejudice. Let's now turn the spotlight to the prosecution, where temptation lurks in the shadows of every headline. The power to prosecute is not merely legal, it is a narrative. And in this climate of media obsession, that narrative is often hijacked before a charge sheet is even read aloud. Some prosecutors leak with intention, brief with drama, and deliver judgment through selective disclosure. But advocacy must not seek applause. It must seek truth within the bounds of the law, not in service of political gain or personal prestige. Here is what must be done. Ethics must be firm, not optional. Commentary on pending trials must be forbidden unless expressly authorized. This is not censorship, it is preservation of justice. And let the DPP's office stand as fortress, not funnel. Media protocols must be drafted, circulated, and enforced. Breaches must not be shrugged away. They must be punished openly and decisively. Because if the prosecutor becomes the playwright and the media the stage, justice will become a mere theater. Media reporting guidelines for sub judice matters. Let's speak now of the fourth estate, the press. Its power is profound, its reach instant. But when a journalist forgets that their role is to inform, not to interpret a trial in progress, the very bedrock of justice begins to crack. Imagine a man charged, but not yet heard in court. His name splashed across headlines, his image framed by insinuation, and his guilt implied before a single witness takes the stand. That is not reporting. It is accusation in disguise. Journalists must understand this. The presumption of innocence is not a courtesy. It is a constitutional shield. It protects the accused from the weight of unverified narratives. And once that shield is pierced by editorial judgment masquerading as news, What's left is a spectacle, not a trial. We need frameworks, firm, written, enforced. The law must draw the line between what is permissible and what must remain sealed. Charges may be published. Names, if lawfully sourced, may be reported. But evidence not yet tested, witness accounts not yet cross-examined, judicial thinking not yet ruled, these are sacred. They are not for public interpretation. And training, yes, training must become doctrine. Every newsroom must teach that ongoing trial means ongoing restraint. Commentary must bow to procedure. The microphone must not speak ahead of the judge. Regulatory bodies must move swiftly, striking out violations like thorns in the side of justice. This is no longer about journalistic freedom. It is about the survival of fairness. So I say, let the press be vigilant, but not invasive. Let the reporter know the limits, so the trial may unfold in dignity. And let justice breathe, uninterrupted by narrative. Social media commentary and contempt risks. WhatsApp groups, Facebook posts, and YouTube analysis now shape public opinion long before judgments are issued. Courts must define boundaries. When does commentary become contempt? Laws should distinguish between free opinion and prejudicial influence. Civil society must educate users. Viral opinion can derail justice, not just enrich debate. Legal education for journalists and influencers. Reporters and online personalities influence how the public perceives guilt, ethics, and justice. But few understand legal procedure or ethical thresholds. Media houses and influencers must be trained in sub judice rules, contempt law, and judicial ethics. Journalism curricula should integrate trial reporting as a distinct legal discipline. Bar associations and regulators can host continuous workshops bridging law and media. The courtroom is sacred. When its silence is drowned by speculation, sensationalism, justice becomes theater. Eswatini must legislate the digital perimeter around its courts, not to silence citizens, but to protect truth. Trials should unfold in full dignity, guided by law, not likes. The law moves forward, you must move with it. See you next Thursday.
Springfield Law Clinic, justice defined, rights protected. We are here to serve.